Hello, all, and welcome to today's live stream. We're going to be tackling an interesting topic today. I think for marketers, we're going to be digging into content marketing analytics. I'm a big proponent of analytics. I think a lot of times measuring and understanding and being able to communicate about the creative work that we're doing and the work that we do as marketers, as content folks, as SEO people is often just as important as the actual work itself, right? You got to be able to tell the story. You got to be able to explain to your boss, justify the expenses. There's all kinds of things that go into it, and so a lot of times the analytics, knowing what, how, and why you're measuring what you're measuring is super important. So today our guest is Brie Anderson. She runs a consulting firm called Beast Analytics, and we're going to be learning from her about different metrics that we should be tracking, how to track them. I think we're going to be digging into GA4 a little bit specifically and talking about some of the changes that are happening in the world of Google Analytics. So I'm super excited to have her on today and learn from her experience and working with her clients. Before we do that, I will do my normal plugs here. First and foremost, please like the video here so that other people can hopefully find this and learn from Brie as well. Secondly, if you haven't already, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We host all kinds of awesome sessions, workshops, Q&As with experts in all kinds of topics about every 2 weeks. So go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Make sure that you don't miss any future sessions. And on that note, if you're also not already a member of Top of the Funnel, would love to have you there as well. Top of the Funnel is our free Slack community. We're focused on all things content marketing, SEO, really big focus on helping people, build their freelance business, expand it as an agency, get clients, but also there's in-house marketers and all kinds of folks in there who are talking shop about content marketing topics, SEO, the latest Google algorithm updates, all kinds of stuff. So would love to have you join us there as well, Top of the Funnel. Just go to yesoptimist.com/tofu. It's a free Slack channel. And yeah, we'll see you inside. Okay. With all that said, I'm really excited again to kick off. And I'd like to welcome on our guest for today, Brie.
What's up? Super excited to be here. I'm stoked. Listen, I'm not seeing many comments come through. So let's see if we can get some people come through. Let us know where you're coming from, what you've been up to today, what you have in your cup. Is it coffee time where you are? Are you drinking some water, staying hydrated? Let us know. Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Tyler. I'm super excited to be here. And like you said, talk really about the content marketing analytics and really talking about the value of content marketing. We have, we've got some people chiming in on YouTube. Really talking about how do you prove that value and, also how do you become data-driven in your content marketing? So really, really excited to talk about this because especially excited that I have a whole bunch of content marketers here because I know we've all been in this situation where we've made something and we are so stoked on it and we're like, this is it. And we publish it and we just sit and we wait and we're like, damn, that feels good, right? You're like, we did it. We did it. It's the world has it. And then somebody just walks in and they go, cool. So glad that that you did that. How exactly did it do? Did people, and you're like, we got some people to the website. It was really good. I saw so-and-so talk about it and they shared it and that's great. But then you're kind of like lost, like just staring at them and just being like, okay, now please leave. I told you my part. But there's a really easy way to avoid this situation actually. This one right here where you're like, don't know. And that's to start with the end in mind, right? So what are those questions you're going to be asked? Start with that in the beginning. Like before you do anything, we need to have this in the back of our heads because it's just like running a race, right? Like you wouldn't run a race if you didn't know where the finish line was because that's going to be a really long race and you're going to have like no sense of like accomplishment at the end of it, right? Now, I use something called the Beast Cycle. We call it that because yes, it is our brand, but also it helps people remember it because it sounds cool. And we're going to go over this entire cycle today. And what this does is it encourages you to be data driven and to think about your data at every step of the process when you are creating content, when you are measuring content, and when you're trying to do some attribution for revenue to your content. So, just real quick, that B cycle is benchmark, explore, analyze, strategize, and test. And if you follow this, your content is going to be data driven, and hopefully you're going to see better results because you're going to be actually tracking your results. So like I said, that the very first thing you have to start with is, what are the questions that people are going to ask me at the end of this? Generally, we have like 3 levels of goals. You have your overall business goals, right? So this quarter we're trying to increase revenue by 5% or whatever that is. So that's going to be part of your goal, right? Then you have your overall like marketing goals, or so what, whether it's a part of a campaign or just like a specific push you're doing in marketing right now. And then the goals that you're directly responsible for, right? So the ones that people come in your office and ask you about that you need to be able to answer. Sometimes there's overlap there, sometimes there's not. That's just something that you're going to need to be aware of. Some of the most common goals we see are purchases, for e-commerce. That's pretty much the big goal that everybody's going to ask you about. But there are other things, especially when it comes to content marketing. A lot of times we're trying to get emails from people. So sign up, some sort of form. Maybe you're offering a download, or maybe you're in like really close competition with a competitor right now, and you're trying to show up for specific keywords that they're showing up for. You're not as worried about the traffic right away. You just need to make sure that you're there. Maybe you're trying to get traffic, right? There are a whole slew of things that you could be asked about, and you want to be prepared to answer those questions. And like I said, it is so important that you think about this at the very beginning. I'm very much like okay, you know what? Maybe if we're talking about this from an SEO perspective, a lot of the times it's like, all right, here's our target keyword. Here are some of the things that we know we need to answer, a summary of the content we're going to create. Think of this as like your content brief. You need to have written in your content brief, what is the goal of this piece of content? Where is it tracked, and how are we going to track it? Right? Because if you just have the goal, oh, well, we want to get more visitors to this page. Okay, but how do we know those visitors came from this, this piece of content that we put out? Like if there wasn't, a piece of content there before, obviously that's kind of easy. But like if we're trying to get more people to go to a category page and we're creating a piece of content, how many people were going to the category page before? Right? That's where this benchmarking idea comes in. But work it into the plan. Have an idea of what the goal is, where it's tracked, and how it's tracked. As content marketers, we have a ton of different places where data is readily available to us. We have like our SEO tools, whether you're using Moz or SEMrush or Ahrefs or whatever it is that you're using, you've got your SEO tools there, right? We have our website analytics, whether you're using Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics, or you're collecting your own analytics. That's cool too. And then we have a social platform. So, I'm a big fan of Ross Simmons, and he always talks about distribution. And, those are still numbers that you are going to want to be privy to about the content that you're creating, right? So, all of those things need to be set up, and you need to ask yourself, how are you going to track it? Is it just going to be as simple as, you write it, you have a content calendar you've created, and you have a specific day, it's in the calendar so that you can specifically see it? Are you going to be using UTM codes? Are you just going to be doing it manually? I don't recommend that, but there are still definitely people out there that do it. So ask yourself, how are you going to track those? Now we're going to dive into each of these things a little bit. The first thing is how are you measuring it within an SEO tool? A lot of our tools have reports or projects, something like that you can set up and monitor over time, right? And the reason it's so important to do that before you publish your content is because you want to have those benchmark numbers, right? We need to know where we started. So if we have a new list of keywords that we're targeting with a piece of content, we need to know, are we already showing up for those keywords or are we not? And if so, where are we, and are we going to increase that? And just overall, if a good thing to do is to have your tracking on for site audits, site speed, all that kind of fun stuff. So make sure you have a report set up, make sure you have keyword tracking set up, and definitely be sure to take those benchmark numbers like the day before you release that piece of content or the week before, whatever that is. In GA4, we're going to be talking a lot about GA4 today. You actually have the ability in Google Analytics 4 to create up to 500 events. Now, that was not the case in Universal Analytics. You did not get that many. I think you got maybe up to 200 depending on your account. So we have everybody has 500 events that they can use in Google Analytics 4. Now, there's 4 different categories. There's automatic, enhanced, recommended, and custom events. The automatic events, there are only really 2 that are collected automatically when you set up Google Analytics 4. First visit and session start. That's it. Now, they have enhanced measurement that is on by default. That's on by default, but you can always turn it off if you don't want some of these things collected, or you can change some of the settings for them as well. But those things are like page views, which you're going to want turned on. You have scroll, clicks, search results, videos, and file downloads. All of those are collected by default. So you don't have to set up the event. Really, you just hit that toggle, make sure it's on, and you're good to go. It's already collecting those things. So that's great. But then they have recommended events, right? So things that they've already created names for, but they've realized that they vary so much from user to user that they can't collect them automatically, right? And then there's custom events where you could just be like, somebody spent 30 seconds on this page and then they went here and they clicked this button, right? Those are generally things that you're going to be setting up in Google Tag Manager, but a lot of events can be created right in platform in Google Analytics 4. So as a content marketer, this is going to be your very favorite thing because you're not going to have to talk to a developer. You're not going to have to get into Google Tag Manager. All you're going to have to do is understand parameters. So in GA4, they have this primary menu here on the left-hand side. So you see a little house, a bar chart, a little arrow thing, a bullseye, and then it looks like a notebook, right? If you click on the notebook looking thing, that's called configure. And it's going to bring you to this screen where you can configure your events, conversions, audiences, and dimensions or metrics. So if you come into the events section here, after you've had Google Analytics 4 running for 24 hours, you'll see all of the events that they're collecting automatically for you start to come through. And you can come in here and hit the create an event button. And you're able to create your own events in platform, like I said, based on parameters. And there's no shortage of parameters here. So now you do have to describe your parameters. There are some that are here by default, things like page location, and those you're going to want to make sure you have as custom dimensions, but that is a presentation for another day. But the events here are things like page location, or parameters here are things like page location, event name, yada, yada. So let's say you have a piece of content and you want people on that page to click on a certain button, right? You could come in here and say page location equals whatever that URL is. And then you could put, it also has to have a click, on a button that contains this word, right? And now you have your event and you've got it set up. You can name it whatever you want. And you have an easy way to track whether or not you're hitting the KPIs that were set for you. So yeah, make sure you go and set up your Google Analytics for events as soon as, that content or before that content is released so that you can track it. And don't be afraid to create events because you get 500 of them. That's awesome. For social channels, again, it's mostly here you need to identify your important metrics so that you can take a benchmark report for them. There's really no easy way to be like, in universal analytics, we had annotate so that you could say, oh, we released a new blog this day, or oh, we did a content refresh this day, whatever it was. There's no easy way to do that in Google Analytics 4. There's no easy way to do that on social channels. So it is going to be kind of a manual process of, taking those benchmarks. If you're really advanced, you can use something like Google Data Studio to collect benchmark data and create I would create 2 data sets. So one would be like, this page from the last 30 days. And then that would be your data set. And then over time, you can keep comparing it back to that 30-day period or whatever you want it to. And there are tons of free API extensions you can use in Google Sheets to pull social numbers the same way. So I didn't put it in here. I don't know why. I use a Google Sheets extension called Sync With, and it allows me to pull all of my Twitter, YouTube. YouTube you can pull in natively. My Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram analytics into a Google Sheet, and then I have it right there in Google Data Studio, and it's free, and it refreshes automatically every day. So there are tons of different ways to do this. The big thing is just take your benchmark numbers, all right, so that we have them. Again, going to bring up Ross Simmons. We have the his 7 rules of distribution, and I'd like to think that this ties in really closely with UTMs. A lot of times once we put a piece of content out, and then it gets distributed, we're like, oh, we've done our work. It has been distributed, but we're not really sure. Like if you were to follow, no, Sync With is a free tool, if that's what you were talking about. So when you're distributing content, we like to think, and if you're doing it in the way that Ross talks about it, where like you have these pieces of content that are evergreen, right? You can share them 50 times over the course of the next 3 years. If you've used the same UTM every time you've distributed it, or you use the same link structure every time you distribute it, you don't know which of those 50 over the last 3 years was the one that did well, right? So I made this little visual here. So create once, distribute forever. If you are using a UTM, I put in the UTM or in the campaign name the date, because I don't really look at campaign name a ton personally when I'm using analytics, but alas, promote where your favorite audience is. So you can put the source right there in the campaign source. Repurpose your greatest hits. Again, make sure that you're putting that date in your campaign name or wherever. Turn long content into short content. So I'm going to show you in the next screen kind of how I set my UTMs up. But really the big thing is creating a structure and ensuring that everyone on your team is following it. And it has to be case sensitive because URLs are case sensitive. So things will get messed up in your analytics if you don't use the same case throughout. Value first, traffic second. That's not really one that we're tracking here. Don't spam communities again, but the paid distribution counts. So again, making sure that you have the type of content that you're sharing. So this is kind of an example. So if you list what that piece of content is, right? So this is for an example of Data Studio. What was I doing it? Sort by change. Okay. Good thing I put the URL there. And that URL is not live, so don't go to it because I haven't done this yet. But this is my plan. So if I make a video, if I take a snippet of the longer video that I've done and put it on Facebook, then I know, right? So that's how I've labeled it. Facebook release video snippet, right? That's just how I know what that means. The source is going to be Facebook, the medium is video, and the campaign is this is the first time that I released it. So it's on 6/1. This is just an example, like I said. Then maybe I release a YouTube in-depth video on how to do it. So it's YouTube, which is just YT, how to, and then Data Studio, because we're not going to be releasing multiple YouTube videos in depth, like how to videos. So I just named it Data Studio. A Twitter thread. Again, we have Twitter threads. And what I like to do is I create a Google Sheet for this and I put in pre-made options for these sources. So you can see that we have YouTube, and I put it like that because then we also have YouTube Shorts, right? For videos and things, we have like a video, a clip from the larger video, how to on TikTok, all these different things. So I like to make presets so that nobody's going in and typing, because again, that case sensitivity thing can really mess people up. But come up with some sort of like nomenclature that you're going to use in your business for your UTMs. And you don't have to set it up the same way that I do. I just highly suggest having something set up so that when you're doing these 7 things, which you should be doing, that you're able to track it and track it well. That makes sense? Cool. All right. But something to remember is that I like to say that every metric measured alone is a vanity metric. So if you say, well, we want to get 100 people to download our, new white paper, great. But like, how do you know if these people are qualified? You could get 100 random people that never actually are going to do business with you, or you could get 100 people from France and the white paper's in English. So now this is awkward because they're not going to be able to read it more than likely. You need to make sure that you're measuring everything around and you need to know how the entire process looks, right? Because if you don't know how the entire process looks, you're not going to be able to answer the follow-up questions, I like to call them. It's like, okay, your downloads were up, but your traffic is down. What happened? Or the purchases aren't coming through anymore. Why? What happened? We aren't ranking for this keyword. What happened? Right? You need to be able to answer those questions. And that's why it's called key performance indicators with an S. You don't generally have one key performance indicator. Again, sometimes it's because you have different goals at different levels within your organization. But it's also just so that you have a full understanding of how your users are interacting with your website, or they're just interacting with your business as a whole. So what I like to tell people is to work it backwards, right? So, and I apologize, these were GIFs, but I uploaded this in a PDF, so you guys don't get to see the fun movements happening. But work your process backwards. So, okay, if we need them to download this file, how are they going to get to the file, right? And then all of these things are essentially affecting whether or not you're going to hit that bigger event. So if our goal is to get more traffic to the website, right? Like we're not even focused about conversion rate at this point. We just need some freaking traffic to this website. Well, there are a lot of things around, exactly, it's reverse engineering. There are a lot of things around that we need to be measuring. So are we showing up for these keywords? Are we getting impressions? Are people clicking through to the website? And are they return users or new users? So are we ranking for keywords where like they've already had an interaction with us? Like if they're all branded keywords, let's get outside of our scope here. Did we get any sort of backlinks that are going to send new users to the website, or return users? And then once they get to the website, are they spending time on the website, or are they just bouncing right away? All of these things are measured so that once we've completed or we've put out our piece of content and we're starting to monitor the content, we can go, okay, well, we got return users, but they're not all return users. Perfect. We got the SEO impressions. We've got the backlinks, and the average time on site's fine, but we're still not hitting our traffic number. Why is that? Oh, our click-through rate is not where it needs to be. So now we know we need to go in and change the title and meta, and maybe add some other schema type things to the website so that, or to the page, so that we can increase these visitors and hopefully hit our goal this time. And once you have an idea of all of those things that you want to collect, like all these events that you're going to be collecting and monitoring, and you know how you're going to collect it, you also need to determine what information you need at each level. So for instance, you know, we have our lovely friends here, Search Engine Journal. They put out tons of news content. They probably have a few different goals. One of them is probably, you know, like time on site. Traffic is probably a really big one for them because they sell ad space. And what they do, so this is a Chrome extension called Data Slayer. What they've done here is they use WordPress, I believe, as their CMS, and the data layer pulls from like the WordPress blog stuff. And if you use Data Slayer, you can see that. So it shows you the data layer that they're working with. And they're tracking all of these different things because all of these different things can have an effect as to whether visitors are coming to the website and whether they're spending time on the website, right? So maybe they have this article word count here. There's probably a way to say, okay, if we can hit this sweet spot, maybe between 1,000 and 2,500 words, we know that people can spend 25 seconds on the website, or they're spending 2 minutes on the website, whatever that is, so that they're able to make, again, more informed, data-driven decisions. And once you have something in the data layer using Google Tag Manager, you're actually able to pull that into Google Analytics 4 and then create custom dimensions based off of those, and also custom events based off of those as well. And again, that's done right here in this configure section. So like I said, you go to the little notebook looking icon. Here you're going to go to custom definitions and create a new dimension based off of a specific parameter that you're pushing through Tag Manager. All of these things, by the way, are things that I can do personally. So if you need help with them, just reach out and we'll get you squared away. But you just select the parameter, create a name for it, and now all of this information can live inside of your GA4 property. So Search Engine Journal can have all of this information live within GA4, right? And imagine the types of decisions they can say, okay, we know we need more news content, or okay, we know we need more content that's 1,500 words or longer, all of this kind of information. So yeah, basically though, just take your benchmarks. All right. I went on a really long tangent, but really a lot of the work is done at the beginning. You know this as a content marketer. The majority of the work that you do is creating the actual piece. So the majority of work that I do is getting people to actually track their metrics, right? And set everything up. All of that work is done on the front end. Set it all up, take the benchmarks, and now you have something to solve for. Now, once you've taken your benchmarks, you get to explore your data, right? So if you are trying to maybe increase ranking, so this is like maybe if you're doing a content refresh, for instance, or maybe you're trying to rank for a new cluster of keywords, or, you know, trying to attract a new customer, whatever it is, explore your data that you do already have around that. Pull a little Jack Sparrow, you know, be comfortable being uncomfortable in this situation. We're just exploring data. We're not trying to find any answers right now. Right now, we're just trying to see what kind of information we can collect. In GA4, yes, I know everybody hates it right now, but guess what? It's our future. We're going to have to use it. In GA4, the two big places that you're going to look right away are the events. So you'll go to this report section, which is the second icon, the one that looks like a chart. And then you're going to go into life cycle, engagement, and go to events. This is where you're going to see whether or not events are being completed, or whatever goals that you've set for yourself are being completed. And then we're also going to look at the pages and screens report to see how specific content is performing. When you go into your events report, this is what you're going to see at the top. So you get two visualizations. I really like this because it makes it really, really easy to see kind of at a glance what's going on, which events are performing well, which ones aren't. all of that kind of fun stuff. And then you get a list of all of the events that have occurred on your website. You get the event count, how many users, how many events per user, and the revenue. Obviously, if you're not doing e-commerce, there's not going to be revenue associated, and that's fine. And if you click into any of these events, then you get that specific event information, which is awesome, right? So we can see for each day how many of those events happened, how many of those events per user, whatever. We also get specific parameter information and live event information. So you can see here's the custom parameter. It looks like, so I pulled all this information from the demo account, so I don't really know what all of this is. They do have the page location. So the clicks, the majority of, or review order, the majority of reviews are happening on this specific page. And the page refer was, this specific page, right? So for Search Engine Journal, it might be how many shares did they get, and they could have page location. So they would know specific articles that got the most shares, right? Pages and screens. This is what this page looks like. If you're familiar with Universal Analytics, this is very similar to your behavior, content, all pages or all pages. This is very similar to that report. So you get your top pages here, pages by users, and screen class here, or users and views. You can change. By the way, almost all of this is customizable in GA4. But again, conversation for another day. But here you get your engagement metrics. So similar to what we saw as behavior metrics, we're seeing new users, views per user, average engagement time, unique scrolls, and you'll see event information as well by page. So you can compare it to how the other pages are performing, see which of your pages are doing best. This can be really helpful if you don't know yet. Maybe if you're going through the B cycle, you don't know yet what kind of content you're going to be creating. You could look at this and go, okay, well, we know these types of pages perform best. So how do we replicate that? Do we need to talk about the same topic? Do we need to use the same format? All that kind of fun stuff. Also in GA4, I do highly recommend that you link all of your things together. So make sure you have Search Console link. Make sure you have Merchant Center, ads, all that. Make sure everything is linked together, so that when you go to do this exploring, you can see how all of those other things are performing, right? You could also just make a really big data studio report and just pull in crap tons of data. I like to do that. A lot of people don't like to do that, but I'm kind of silly in that way. I love it. But it doesn't end with your data, right? We can also do some exploring of our competitors' data. So using a tool like Ahrefs, you can go in and pull, their backlink history and profile. You can pull their keyword history and kind of see what they're doing. But I also like to do things just manually sometimes and just go see, like, how are they showing up in the SERP, right? So I actually just dropped the actual URL that I was competing with into the search bar, and I can see that they have shit tons of images showing. So they must just have a ton of images on the site. They have a lot of images that are showing up in the search engine result page. I also see that they have one line of snippet, or what the heck are these called? Structured snippets. I don't remember. Whatever. They have those one line of, like specific points on the page right here. And then I also noticed that they had a YouTube video, which means they're focused on distribution, and they've done some sort of clustering here. So it's UA or GA4 versus UA, but then they do acquisition reports in Google Analytics 4 versus Universal events, all sorts of things. And then I also went to, because they did have a YouTube video, I went to YouTube or to that YouTube video, and I used a tool called TubeBuddy, which they have a free version. Even their pro version, though, is like $100 a year, totally worth it. And you can see all of the keywords or all of the tags that they're ranking for, which are essentially keywords in YouTube land. All of the keywords they're ranking for, how many people have viewed the video, what they've done to optimize the video, all sorts of stuff, how many times that it's been shared on social. So I just went and grabbed all of that information as well. And then lastly, something else creepy that you could do, especially if you're looking for distribution channels, or if you're still in the ideation phase of like, who's this target audience, just drop the URL of the page that you're going to be competing with into Twitter and see who all shared it. This gives you a really good idea of who this guy is. And it's mostly just one of us. He's just one of us, right? So once you have all of this random data and you're like, what do I do with it now? That's great, but what do I do with it? Analyzing data really comes down to two things: identifying outliers and identifying trends. If it's a trend, it's something that you can trust to almost be true almost all of the time, right? Within reason. If it's an outlier, it's something that's worth investigating because something has gone really right or really wrong. And either way, we want to know why, right? So analyzing comes down really to those two things. And Google Analytics 4, this is actually made pretty easy because there's built-in things like anomaly detection. So on all of your line graphs, if something is statistically significant, meaning you no longer have to run any of the statistical analysis, you don't have to do that. If it's statistically significant based on the last 90 days or past 30 days, depending on how you have it set up, it will flag it and will say, hey, we expected that you would be at this level, but for some reason you're at this level. You definitely want to take a look at it. They also have built-in insights, meaning when you go to the home screen here, you're going to see a whole slew of insights. It'll be things like most of your conversions are coming from PPC right now. The country that's ordering the most is here. Your form fills were down last week. Like all of those insights. So those trends you'll be able to find here on this home screen. And so trends and outliers are right there, baby, right in Google Analytics 4, and you don't even have to do tons of work. They have tons of visualizations. Like I said, I really love these visualizations in GA4, specifically scatter plots, because it's so easy. And I don't know if it's just me, but it's so easy to see when something is underperforming. Like you can make a trend line kind of in your brain, or I can kind of make a little trend line here. Even if you just go corner to corner, that's more times than not the trend line. And if something's under, that means it's probably not performing as well. So the event count here for this was kind of low, and the number of users that did it was kind of low. So it's like something's going on here, or maybe it's just an event that, maybe users aren't doing as often, but it's still worth looking into a little bit, right? So like if this was, and again, you can customize this. So I could make this be total views versus event count, right? Like which events aren't happening the most often. You can customize that, but these scatter plots in my idea are very helpful. Same thing if it was like page, like product views versus purchases. Like what are products that get viewed a lot but aren't purchased a lot? Those, we have some easy optimizing that we can do there. And you can also come in and create specific audiences based off of things. So in Universal Analytics, anytime you created a segment, it was saved for like ever, which was really annoying. So I always tried to avoid them. But you can create comparisons using this like pencil and paper icon here based on, where people land, or based on what events they have achieved or where they came from, all of these different things. You can create a comparison based on that and then compare that data to the all users data, or you could look at just that data if you X out the all users. But like scroll depth. So if one of the KPIs that we were looking at was scroll depth, then maybe we look at this and say, okay, how was our page that we just created comparing to all users? Well, the scroll depth actually isn't as impacted daily, it looks like, which is kind of weird. But that would be a good thing, and it has less scrolls, but it also has probably less overall page visits. So again, create those customizations. Like I said, here's all users for some reason has a daily dip or a weekly dip. I'm assuming that's Saturday, Sunday, where the this landing page doesn't have that big of an effect. And you can apply it across all reports. So you can see this for purchasers, how they're using this site. You can see that more users are coming and purchasing from direct than just all users. The majority of users come from organic search, but those people aren't converting as much, which kind of makes sense because they're probably coming back directly, but alas. And again, you don't have to avoid these comparisons because they don't live forever. They just live once. But if you wanted them to live forever, you could go back to that configure screen that we were talking about and create a new audience. Again, there's tons of conditions that you can use from basically any dimension that you've created. So any qualitative sort of data, you can create an audience based off of. And there's predictive audiences in GA4 as well, based on predictive year churn and predictive spend, which is really cool. So for this instance, if one of the main selling points for us, right, was we wanted to be able to go back to the C-suite and say, hey, we created this piece of content and we were able to secure a backlink from Forbes in this, and it's generated really good content, and we want to be able to prove that, we could create an audience based on the people that have come from that specific backlink and track that all throughout GA4 and be able to give them specific information on how those users are working or how they're interacting with the website. But when it comes to events, something that people tend to forget is that it's not so much about the destination, right? It's about the journey, right? Come on, man. It's all about the journey. So they're not, you're only seeing a small piece of the pie when you look at those numbers, like when you look at the events view or when you look at the pages and screens view in GA4. You want to actually go to this one that has like the target with the clicking on it. It's called advertising snapshot. I'm really not sure why, because there's no advertising specific data here. It's all attribution. So alas, I'm not sure where they came up with that, but this is where you're going to find all of your attribution information. So by default in GA4, which this is also new from GA4, universal was last click by default because that's what ads use more times than not. GA4 is cross-channel focused. So that's what you're going to see by default. But you can compare different attribution models here and see, like for organic search, and this has like assisted conversions, but you know, with one view, they had 3 conversions, but in another view, they had 9 conversions. So last click was only 3. And that's what you would see like in an ad space or something like that. But in cross channel, they actually had 9. And that's because when we go to the other view, which is conversion paths, it will show you all of the touch points, right? So page search twice and then organic search 39, right? Like that, it'll show you all these different touch points. And you can see how many conversions, how much revenue, what the day's conversions were, and how many average touch points there were. So make sure that you're looking at this as well, because you can add a secondary dimension of landing page, specifically if you're creating content that's meant to get people to the website. If you add that secondary dimension of landing page and you see that maybe people are hitting that landing page in the middle of their journey, well, that there's still revenue to be attributed to that specific, that touch point. Oh man, I forgot. This was supposed to be a chick spying on people, so just picture it in your imagination. Going back to our friends that were writing about Google Analytics 4, what I really noticed with this piece of content was that they really focused on the organic side of this. There wasn't a ton of distribution, like not many people. I mean, they've got a couple backlinks to it. They didn't really share it on social much. They didn't promote it on social. It was all, they focused specifically on organic. So there's the trend there. Their trend is that they are focused on organic, and they've done, every time they created one of these other pieces of content to cluster with it, they focused on how it's going to show up in the search engine result page and optimize their images and videos and all of that to show up in search. What you can also do though, which you didn't talk about this in the last one, or in the explore phase, is you can go to Facebook ad library and you can type in whatever keyword that you're trying to rank for or creating content about, you can type that in and it will bring up all of the ads that have run specifically with that keyword in it. So when I look at this for Google Analytics 4, I can see our good friend over at Analytics Mania has been talking about Google Analytics 4 and promoting it. And what I noticed was all of his copy was the same. He's just testing imagery, which makes me believe that he probably has tested this and realized that this copy works. So that's the trend there. And maybe I need to keep that in mind when I create content for my distribution, whether it's paid or organic. So now we know what's up. We've identified trends. We're able to identify the outliers, and we're feeling good. Now it's time to create the strategy based on this. So again, whether we're trying to see like if we're doing well or not, whatever, if we're just getting started with the piece of content and we wanted to know all this, all strategies basically fall into one of three buckets. It's either something you need to start doing more of, and you're going to create something. It's something that you need to stop doing the exact way you're doing it right now because it's just not working the way that we have it laid out right now. Or it's something we need to scale and do more of because it's working really, really well. And it's pretty easy to figure out which one of these buckets they fall into. The first question you ask yourself is, does it make you money? Is it reaching the KPI? Whatever that is, basically, this should say like, are you reaching your goal? If the answer is no, you can't keep doing things the exact way you've been doing them. So if you're creating listicles of 11 ways to do X every single week and you're not hitting your KPIs, you can't keep making listicles every single week because they're just not working. It's not a smart business choice. You need to change something, whether that is, the topic you're writing on. It's probably the fact that you've done 50 listicles, like try a new format. So that's the first question. If it doesn't make you money, then it automatically goes into this bucket of stop because it's just not a good business. And that doesn't mean you have to stop doing it altogether. It just means you can't do it the exact way you're doing it right now. Maybe those listicles are great, but you're not distributing them anywhere. Then focus on that distribution, right? But if it does make you money or it is helping you reach your goal, then you're going to be in one of these two buckets. If it did have a strategy behind it, so it wasn't one of those outliers, and it was a trend, right? Then it's something that you should scale because we've seen more times than not that this specific type of content or piece of content is going to work. So how do we do more of that? How do we put more effort into that? You want to invest more resources in it, but that doesn't always mean money. It could mean time. It could mean more distribution. Whatever that looks like for your business is what you want to do. But that's where you know that you need to scale. If it did make you money, but you didn't have a strategy behind it, it just kind of happened, maybe there's something there that you should start focusing on. So I see this a lot with businesses that we go into their analytics and we're seeing that they're getting, excuse me. We see that they get a ton of traffic from specific blogs, like really qualified traffic too. If that's the case, find more. And it's like people that they didn't have a relationship with. It's just random people. Like if you find that to be happening, one, nurture that relationship, make a relationship with that person, see what you can like offer them and how you can do more work with them. And then also find more people like them. Like if that audience is following this person, who else are they also following in? How do we work with them? Right. So these are the things that you want to start doing more of. So this is what the entire decision flow looks like. Does it make you money? No, stop. We got to change something. If it does make us money, did it have a strategy? If yes, scale, do more of it. If no, start and really start making the most out of that. And that's the B cycle. You take all of that information, you create the strategy, right? So that's where we were just at. You create that strategy and then you test. You go out and you actually do the work, or you actually distribute the content, or you create another piece of content, whatever that is. And then you compare it to the benchmark. Remember those benchmarks I talked about at the beginning? To see if you've really moved the needle. Like, have you truly made the impact that you were looking to make? And then it goes again and again and again and again, because it's a cycle. It's never ending. Ideally, we will have content, or we will create content that can be everlasting. It can be that evergreen content. But that doesn't mean that just because it's working today, that it's going to work in 5 years when everything is short form video, or everything is VR, or everything is whatever. You have to constantly be reassessing, or you're going to fall behind and your content isn't going to be performing as well as it did. All right. We have, I think, about 10 minutes for questions. Is that right? I flew through that.
That was awesome. No, that was great. Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much, Brie, for walking us through the framework. Super awesome to kind of see all those pieces and how they fit together. Folks who are on the stream here, feel free to pop in your questions about analytics or about any of the specific steps. Oh yeah, here we go. We got a good question here. So this person says they're going in. They're getting crazy data from badly created GA4 events, which record and show everything except for goals. So can new events alter the old ones, or any way to use that data?
Yeah. So I guess it depends on records and shows everything except for the goals. Yeah, there is a way. Let me see if I can find it. You can, oh, well, I guess that's 2 goals. There are ways to like merge 2 events together. There's not really a way. Let's see. Let me look. Sorry, I'm doing some on the fly searching here. I know, like, you can modify events, right? So that's how you would make them better. I don't know how you would use that data, especially because I'm not quite sure what kind of events we're talking about.
Yeah.
But I would suggest going in and modifying the events, especially if it's like a name that you still want to use. Go in and modify it and just make note that, hey, up until this day, we weren't tracking this correctly. So that you know.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And again, depending on what you're doing, one other thing that you might be able to do is maybe you can surmise what that goal could have been and sort of manually compile it. So like, for instance, if one of those goals was like, sign up or something, and they land on a specific page, then maybe you could go back and look at like page view data and kind of manually compile it. Yeah, that's tough. That's yeah, as you said, that's always like the key thing is like you got to get it set up first before you start moving stuff. Otherwise, you're just not going to have the data that you need to answer the questions down the line.
Yes, debug. That's what a lot of people think, that like, oh, surely this is going to work, and then they didn't actually go through the process to watch it, and then they get all sorts of weird data. Let's see. I just sent you a link that you can drop into the comments, because for some reason I can't drop anything in the comments here. That is the link on Google's on Google's documentation for changing events in GA4. There you go. Does GA4 make multi-touch attribution more effective for content marketing? My efforts to build multi-touch attribution reports always feel like they underestimate the value of content. I think GA4 is trying to put more like emphasis on those multi-touch users. A lot of the documentation that they've rolled out with GA4 says, that they are trying to prepare themselves for a multi-touch, multi-device, and cookieless browsing. So you lean on first touch reported and report on assisted conversions. Yeah, I highly recommend doing that. I generally give my clients kind of 2 numbers. Like, this is the number that we're getting from cross-channel. But by the way, when we do the math, we can see that 60% of all conversions touched organic traffic. And you can see that in they don't have it in GA4 right now. Actually, they don't have the like pure assisted conversions number, but you can find it in Universal Analytics under conversions, multi-channel conversions, And that's where you see all your assisted conversions. You just type in the source or the landing page, whatever. I do highly recommend, though, especially if you're focused specifically on content, adding in that secondary dimension of landing page or even just page. The only reason I don't say page as much is because that returns a lot more data, which can really slow things down. And things get a little bit murky because generally people are visiting multiple pages in a visit, hopefully, which makes those path links really, really long, and things can get ugly quick.
For sure. Yeah. Again, I think another great point that you brought up, Brie, is just like, yeah, having sort of a range of data points so that you can sort of triangulate some of these things, because as you what was your saying, any data point on its own is like a vanity metric, right?
Any metric measured alone is a vanity metric, for sure.
Yeah, 100%. That just reminds me of so like I think one of the biggest challenges, with our clients is always like figuring out the right set of metrics so that we can try to answer some of those more difficult questions.
Right.
And you sort of mentioned this as you're talking about your framework, is that like, okay, say organic traffic is down this week. Well, why is it down? As you said, is it because we lost rankings? Is it because there's less search traffic? Maybe it's a holiday. Maybe there's maybe our one of our most important posts lost rankings, or maybe the click-through rate dropped, or maybe our website was down.
Google update or whatever. Yeah.
And the only way that you can answer those questions usually is if you have a broad set of metrics that you're measuring consistently. And so you can see, okay, this number was up, but this number was down. So therefore we think, that this is actually what was driving this change or this trend.
Yeah. It's a lot. A lot of people don't really love doing it. So, I mean, I get it, right? But that's why you have to have kind of those core metrics. Like you're saying, you have core metrics that you report on and that whatever, but in the background, you need to have access to all of these other metrics that affect it just in case, right?
For sure. Yep. Yeah. I always tell our clients, like we build sort of a custom like scorecard for each of our clients where we're tracking different metrics. And we're usually tracking sort of the macro view. And then we can go back, of course, and look at GA for more of the tactical and sort of like page by page metrics and that kind of stuff. But yeah, we always start like sort of basically like as deep in the funnel as we can, right? So like conversions or revenue or whatever, that's always like the North Star. And then we basically kind of work backwards. And I think sort of similar to how you were describing it, we want to understand what was affecting, what were the underlying things that were affecting the main outcome that we care the most about, right? So
absolutely
revenue, and that's up or down. Is that because traffic is up or down, or is it because the conversion rate increased or changed? And then even one step beyond that is like thinking about the SEO metrics you mentioned, right? Like if we're seeing organic traffic is up, like why? Right? Do we get more links? Did we publish more content? Like what happened there? How do we affect that change? And then how, as you said, how do we do more of it? How do we scale that if it's working?
Yeah. And that's, I mean, it all comes back to staying data driven, and especially in this world where things change literally by the minute sometimes, you need to know, you need to have all of that data available at your fingertips so that you can make decisions moving forward that are going to be best for your business, whether that's, I like to keep it relatively simple with like, it's either stop, scale, or start. It's one of those three things.
Yeah, totally. And I love to like, going back to your framework and sort of that cycle, like I think of how you can apply that to so many different like facets of our work, right? Because it's, as you said, maybe it's, we're trying to figure out a better strategy for our distribution, right? And you kind of use that cycle to sort of test and iterate and learn from that process. And then at the same time, you can apply it to like SEO, like, okay, hey, we're trying to improve our organic search traffic. Here's what our strategy is going to look like. Here's our benchmarks, and then kind of go through that process as you laid out.
Yeah.
Looks like we got one more question here, and then we'll be probably wrapping up after this one. So, any suggestions for searching / targeting industry specific message metrics or KPIs?
I would say, like, again, it's working backwards. What is it that you want your customer to do? And so it's not always going to be the same. Like for me, obviously I want new clients, but in order to get a new client, they have to email me. We've had to have talked over email, which means they probably had to send a contact form, which means they probably had to get to my website, which means they probably saw me on social media. But which social media platform is it? Is it like Twitter or YouTube? You know what I mean? Like, just work it all backwards. What does that flow look like? And sometimes, to be fair, we think of what a flow looks like that we and we're wrong. But that's where Google comes into play, and they'll tell you, hey, you think your behavior flow is this, but it's actually this. But I would say, I'm not a huge fan of like industry benchmarks because everybody does business different, and every business operates different. So I would say kind of look at your business. I mean, obviously, for like e-commerce, you're looking at things like purchases, average order value, conversion rate, product views, add to carts. That process is a kind of longer, but kind of more finite.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would say really just look at your business and how you would assume
Yep.
people go through, and then how they actually go through.
Right. Yeah, I think you mentioned, trends versus outliers, and I think like,
Yep.
the trend in my experience is usually the most important thing from like a business performance perspective. Like, are we improving? Are we moving in the right direction? And you can't know that by looking at someone else's business. You have to look at your own data over time and understand that.
Yep. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Brie, this is amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time here, and you've got some info here about how folks can get in touch with you. Any other last
Oh,
words
yeah.
or anything?
Let me give you the link. I can't believe I didn't do this beforehand. I do have a course out right now for Google Analytics 4. So if people are interested in that, it's kind of like you can kind of just like self-serve that and go through it yourself. Or I do also offer one-on-one training. You just reach out to me through there. But yeah, it's been great. Thanks for having me. You got an awesome little crowd here, so it's been fun.
Yeah, thanks all for joining today's stream, and hope you learned something. Give us a shout out and let us know if you have any additional questions, and definitely reach out to Brie through her website, on Twitter, or email.
Alrighty, thanks everyone.
Thanks all. Have a great day. Cheers.